Irie friends, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me today. Again, the plan today was to spray the fruit trees. You guys know I planned that yesterday and it was raining. Today, like Winnie says, it's been a blustery day. The winds are insane and it's not a good day to spray because it would not end up on the tree. It'll just end up right in my face and we don't want that. So instead, I figure we take a little break from seed sowing still and we can discuss some common mistakes that we are making and should be avoiding in order to get some nice seedlings and transplants for our garden season. And just not coming up on my 5th year gardening, I know that these are things that maybe some of you are also experiencing, and we just want to do a refresher so that we are making sure that we are giving our seeds the best conditions possible in order to do what it wants to do, which is grow. But there are things here that are also not in our control, so I do want to touch on those as well. So let's jump right into it. I did make notes right here, so if you see me looking down, that's because I do not want to forget. So the first thing that I want to get into is the soil medium that we are deciding to use for seed starting. And you know, we have a couple options here. The one that I tend to stick to is either a seed starting mix or I make my own seed starting mix. Both of those work really well. The thing with the potting soil that you want to avoid is all the big chunks, little pieces of bark, little sticks, all of that stuff. You can actually block your seed from germinating if a piece of that is on top of it or if a clump of it is below it. So that would prevent the roots from going down as well. So maybe you got the seed to germinate, but it's just not growing really well in the container, and that could be an issue if you're using potting soil. So make sure you are sifting your potting soil in order to get out any of those larger chunks. Please avoid using topsoil or soil from outside. It is a bit too dense, and then also there's pests that you may bring indoors, and there's no other beneficial insects indoors to combat those pests, so you want to avoid using that for seed starting. The next one is you are planting your seeds at the wrong depth. So a general rule that I normally use now is based on the size of the seed. I try to go 2 times as deep as the width of your seed. So smaller seeds, I normally just lay those on top, sprinkle with some vermiculite on top of that. And as they get larger, you'll be able to go deeper and deeper in the soil. But that is just my general rule, and it has worked really well for me. If you aren't sure, a lot of times the seed packet has the information of how deep you need to plant your seeds. If they ask that they need light to germinate, make sure that you are giving them light, or if they need darkness to germinate, make sure that you are covering them either with a little bit of soil or some vermiculite in order to give them a bit of darkness. So seed depth is really important, because if you are going too deep with a smaller seed, it's not going to have enough energy to not only sprout but then to push up to the height that it needs to in order for you to seed and continue to grow. It's not going to have all that energy in that small seed pod, essentially. For larger seeds, you want to go ahead and plant it deeper. It has that energy stored in the plant in order to come up for you guys. But if you do it too shallow, then it's going to start having root issues. So you just want to make sure that you are planting your seeds at the correct depth. The next one is using expired seeds or seeds that are not viable. We touched on that a bit when we were planting our onion seeds. I told you that last year I had onion seeds that were maybe 2 or 3 years old. And the thing with onion seeds is just after I would say a year or 2 mark, 2 years max, but definitely that year mark, you want to use up all the onion seeds that you have. They're just, the germination rate just drops drastically once they pass that year mark. As well as, I don't remember which other seeds. I think I have the same issues with chives. It is in the onion family, but I did not check to verify. But chives, I would say also you would want to have fresh seeds to make sure that it will germinate for you guys. So although 90% of seeds are viable, like you know, after a few years or so, sometimes even way longer than that, there are seeds that you have to make sure that you use them within the year. If you guys have any more seeds that you know off the top of your head that you have to use up within the year, please list them down in the comment section below, because my mind is currently blanking and I'm not remembering if there's anything other than the onions that you need to have them used all up within that year. I just literally lost all my light. I just saw it just fade right away. But we're gonna jump in the next one. So number 4 is growing in the wrong temperature or having temperature fluctuations. You guys saw when I had the peppers out for planting the peppers, I had taken them off the heat mat and I decided to just stop what I'm doing and just go ahead and put them right back on the heat mat. You do not want the temperature to change drastically, meaning you don't want it to be really cold and then hot, or in a warm environment and then go right into a cool environment. And then you also want to make sure that things that do need a warmer temperature, that you're keeping them not only in a area that's a little bit warmer, but you're also giving them additional help using a heat mat in order to germinate. So that is a really essential part of growing, is just knowing which one of your seeds are maybe more cold hardy. Those things like sit in a more cooler area as you are growing, which you can see I kept my brassicas and my cool season crops in that back room where it's nice and cool, versus things like my peppers and some of my flowers. I keep them in the basement where the temperature is around 65 degrees and I use the heat mat to help them germinate. So just knowing your plants and reading the packet. If the packet doesn't have a lot of information, just go ahead and do a little bit of Google search, and I'm sure it'll come up to see what's the best temperature to grow those plants in. The next one is overwatering / underwatering. What's happening sometimes when you put them on the heat mat, that is a way that the water can evaporate faster. So you want to make sure that you are checking them constantly when they're on the heat mat, but also when you have moved them underneath the light system. The light system also dries out the soil, so you want to check that to make sure you are keeping that soil moist, because the seeds need that moisture in the soil in order to germinate. So if you maybe started them on the heat mat and they were still maybe relatively moist, and then you put them under the light, that light takes out the moisture, and then the seed doesn't have enough moisture, and then before you know it, in a couple of days or so, there's nothing coming up, and that's mainly because you left the seed without any moisture to germinate. So I like to say, whenever I'm starting any seeds, I check every single one of my seed starting containers every single day without fail. If it feels like it's just a little bit light, I go ahead and add that water, and I give my plants water through the bottom so that the soil and the roots suck up the amount of water that it's needed, and then I just dump the extra after about 10-15 minutes. To help with my over watering or under watering, I like to sprinkle vermiculite on top of my seed trays and my seedlings, and that holds in some of that moisture, and that also sucks up some of that excess moisture from me overwatering. Don't be afraid to add more vermiculite. If you see that your plant is starting to grow that green algae on top, just sprinkle some more vermiculite, hold back on the water a bit, and it should take care of itself. The next one is not enough light. So I try to keep my seedlings approximately 1 inch or 2 away from the light system. That way they have the light close to them and they are not stretching too much for the light. You will see signs when your plants aren't getting enough light. You'll see them become very leggy, and that's when you just have a really tall stem and then the flower bit, well, the leaf bit on top. That's a sign that you are getting leggy seedlings. Some of them I do chuck based on how fast they germinate and grow, but a lot of times I will just take that seedling and plant them deeper, and that usually, well, transplant them in a bigger container, plant them deeper to where you're just covering all the legginess up to where you see that leaf, and that usually fixes the issue. But for most of the time, because I start my seeds so early, I'll just go ahead and restart another seeds. This happens to me a lot with hibiscus. So I start hibiscus early because it's a tropical plant and it needs a lot of time in order to bloom, and I will put it on the seed mat along with other plants, and I always forget that I need to do hibiscus separately, and it germinates so quickly that maybe in like overnight, from checking it in the morning to overnight, it's already germinated and they become leggy so quickly. So that's a plant that I definitely need to remember. Do not put them on the heat mat at all, and just have them immediately just underneath the light, because they just come up so quickly. You kind of miss that window. So that's something to think about if you've had experiences before where your seeds germinated really quickly and it became really leggy. That's something to maybe keep in mind, like for next time, maybe I shouldn't give it additional heat, or I should just keep it underneath the grow light to prevent some of that legginess. The next one is cold stratification, and for some of the seeds, cold stratification is just when you keep them in a cooler location like your fridge for, it depends on the seed, it could be for maybe 10 days or up to a month before you actually put it out for the seed to germinate. A lot of those seeds I did use for the winter sowing, only because I just definitely wouldn't remember. But if your seeds need cold stratification, you want to remember to do that, because it's just going to take a longer time to germinate, and by time it does germinate, if it does, you would have probably thought that it wasn't going to come up because you didn't do that initial step, which takes away from the length of time that it needs to germinate. The next one that happens all the time is you are not removing it from the heat mat, or you're not taking off the humidity dome fast enough, and that kind of goes into the just checking on your seedlings daily. Let's say you have a tray of seeds that you have on the heat mat with a humidity dome over it. As soon as you see a seed in that batch germinate, you need to remove that humidity dome and you need to take it off the heat mat, because what happens is when you have the humidity dome and you have it on the heat mat, it's just an accelerated growth space, and you'll find that this is going to create very leggy seedlings very quickly. So you want to, like I say, always check your seedlings every day, maybe day and night, to stay on top of the growth and making sure that you are switching them from one environment to the next. As a safety precaution, maybe you could have the seeds already under the light if you feel like you aren't able to check them as quickly, or maybe don't use a humidity dome or a heat mat if you don't have to. A lot of things you don't need the heat mat. The only thing that I would say you should use the heat mat is just mostly peppers. Everything else, you could really just keep it under the grow light, and when it pops up, it's already there for you and you won't have to worry too much. So the next one is patience, and you guys saw that I didn't have much of that for my parsley and my chives, which are notorious for taking a longer time to germinate. So I planted three sets of parsley, 2 sets of chives. Well, no, I planted 3 sets of both of those. I planted chives outside, I planted chives and parsley outside using the winter sowing method. I planted both of them in the back room, and I also planted both of them in the basement. I've seen the parsley come up, but the chives haven't yet, but I'm sure they will come up. It just takes a longer time. But if you are impatient like I am, maybe it's good to ease your mind by planting an extra set. Plant one set when you are initially supposed to plant them, and then maybe 2 weeks out, plant another set. But just make sure your seeds are viable. Once your seeds are viable, you should have zero problems. It's just about giving the seeds time and having some patience. The last one is the one that's out of our control, and sometimes we buy seeds that are just, the packet is just not good. You guys saw I bought the rosemary recently, and the packet of seeds wasn't that good, and the only reason why I knew that is because I grew rosemary before, so I know what the seeds are supposed to look like. So the packet had like little bits of what would be seeds, but the rest was just crumbled. But if you are new to growing, you would think that, oh, okay, like maybe that's what the seeds are supposed to be, and I should just sprinkle that dust on top, and that wouldn't have worked, and you wouldn't have gotten rosemary. So that's a case where it's something that's out of our control, and we just have to get a new seed packet and start again. But those are all my common mistakes that I have compiled together for you guys. If you have any other top mistakes that you've been making and realize that you've been making, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. But thank you guys so much for watching. Until then, Irie up yourself, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.